addition to all of that, I felt tricked. And yeah, I felt stupid. Because deep down, I did expect a miracle. Only a couple of weeks later in church, the pastor reminded us to be strong and to remember that the Lord works in mysterious ways. And when he said it, the looks of cold anger, the congregation glancing around at each other, mysterious ways. It was too soon. It just felt too soon. And I didn't know it. But looking back, those words, they feel like the beginning of the end for me. After services, the oldest lady in the church, she said it out loud. She said she'd been going to a doctor for years. That's what the good Lord made doctors for, to keep her dancing. This was blasphemy. But she was too old to get kicked out of the church. And when she spoke, I saw other people nodding in agreement. There was no big declaration. It just seemed like half the congregation just decided. They just decided they were going to do things a different way. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I should go and get my ear checked out by a professional. So, for my very first doctor's appointment, I went to an ear specialist. And when the doctor started examining my ear, the look on his face made me feel ashamed. And under his examination, he poked something, scraped something, and I could hear him. Maybe not as loudly as I should, but I could hear him. I could hear him when he whispered that something bad had happened here. When he said, "Oh, no, what happened here?" I could hear him. I could hear every single word. He'll take the pain away. I know. He'll take the pain away. He'll take the pain away. I know. He'll take the pain away. You are listening to Snap Judgment, and to hear more stories, visit snapjudgment.org.
This is Youthcast. I'm Emily Corwin. This is Kamna Shastri singing and playing piano. She's been studying piano since she was 4 years old and Indian classical music since she was 9. You can hear both of those influences in this song, which she wrote and recorded. Kamna is also a radio producer. On this episode of Youthcast, we're going to look at 2 pieces she produced with KUOW's Radioactive program in Seattle, Washington. Both of these pieces are radio stories about music. In one, Kamna introduces us to her friend's a cappella group at the University of Washington. Their songs blend Indian and Western music traditions. As you know, this is a mixing of music styles Kamna was already really familiar with.
What caught me about it was the way they meshed 2 different languages together actually made it sound really cool. And for me, because I also have that Indian background and I'm living here too, I guess I felt a really personal connection to that, and I really love music, so I felt like it was a great way of putting 2 cultural experiences together into one.
Next, we'll hear a clip from Kamna's piece called One Melody Anew.
Before coming to college, my Indian life and my American life, I guess that's the best way to describe it, they both used to be kind of separate, because while I was at school, I guess I was totally American because I hung out with like a diverse community of people. And while I was at home or outside of school, I mostly hung out with only the Indian community. So, I mean, I'd see the two personalities, like they'd be completely different.
Sarvani Gorti saw her own personality go back and forth when she interacted with two different cultures. With her Indian friends, conversations revolved around Indian music and movies. Those were things she couldn't quite discuss with her friends at school. Her experience was like a pendulum, until she went to college.
That's a clip from Kamna's piece called One Melody Anew. You can hear more of that story on our website, youthcast.org. Kamna recently produced another piece having to do with music about a guy who buys and repairs old pianos for a living. I asked her what it's like to tell radio stories about something as abstract as music.
I think it is a challenge, especially in comparison to if you're making a story, specifically a human interest story or something about a person or an issue. Music is something, there's certain aspects that you can't explain about it because they're so emotional and intuitive that when my editors ask me, they're like, well, what does he mean when he says this about, music or about the piano? And I'm like, well, I can't explain it. It's so personal. Like, it's a feeling that you can't explain in words. So I think that's a huge challenge in radio because you're using words to get the message across. So when you can't explain it in words, how do you get that message across?
One of the differences between the first piece about Indian music and this one is that Kamna hardly knew the person she was interviewing.
We have a piano at home, but my teacher's been telling me for years to get a nice baby grand or a grand, and my parents noticed I was playing a lot more these past couple months. So during Christmas, they were kind of like, maybe we should get you a piano, and I guess they found this guy who's really eco-friendly and also salvages old pianos, and I guess, when I looked at his website, because they told me about how it was kind of interesting. So when I looked at it, I was like, this would be a really interesting person to interview.
Kamna told me that in the beginning, it's easier for her to interview someone she knows, like her friend in the a cappella group, because she's not as shy. But she said something really special happens when she's interviewing a stranger, if she lets herself open up.
For me, something happens in my mind where, I have no sense of myself in that, any sort of judgment and any sort of, me sticking to my opinions or whatever, which I tend to be a little opinionated. All of that just drops while I'm doing the interview and putting the story together. And by doing that, I feel like their story in a way becomes almost my story, if that makes sense.
Stay tuned for Kamna Shastri's piece, Broken Notes. This is Youthcast from Generation PRX. Stay in touch on Twitter, Facebook, and generationprx.org.
We stand at the entrance to the metal shed that Dean Petrick uses to store his pianos. So here are all the pianos. Not all of them, but...
No, this is just 53 of them. I have more.
I can't even fit inside. The shoulder of a piano faces me. I have to reach over the thick wood to touch the keys. Oh, this one barely works.
This one over here.
The pianos are here because they need fixing. Petrick is a piano technician. He hauls away his clients' pianos when they stop working. Usually, that means one key doesn't sound.
It costs a fortune to build a piano. And then what happens over time is the pianos are like cars, and the parts start wearing out. People think, well, this is going to cost more to fix than I'd get if I sold it. So they just want to get rid of them.
Fixing pianos is like a call of duty for Petrick. He could send them to the dump. Instead, he takes them in for repair and redistribution. Petrick understands pianos so well he can tune them by ear. By fixing the pianos, Petrick keeps alive the tradition of piano tuning.
I'm one of the piano tuners of the world, and when there's fewer and fewer of us too, by the way. In fact, the whole piano industry is dying and fading away because people are just buying electronic instruments and you just push a button and it plays for you. You don't have to do anything. So yeah, I'm just drawn to pianos. I have to fix them.
The problem now is that Petrich's running out of space, and as a result, the pianos are kept in tents where they're exposed to the elements. They rust in the damp and cold, and some come unglued. When the pianos get beyond repair, Petrich has to dismantle them. Some of the artistic wood pieces he saves to give to artists, or to recycle for such things as shelves. The metal pieces are kept for replacement parts. The rest scatter the ground behind Petrich's house. Smooth mahogany wood lies in a pile beside deep earthen brown. Scraps of metal poke from between the wooden remnants. They're the skeletons of pianos past.
Oh, it's a beautiful color. I mean, all the work that goes into making a piano, and then it ends up in my wood stove.
So you just use all this for firewood?
It's firewood now, yeah.
Does it ever kind of seem sad
no,
that they're...
always very sad for me to tear apart pianos. I try and keep them as long as I can.
Petrich has 187 pianos. 100 of them are available for adoption free of cost. 20 have been fixed and are for sale. He hopes to rent out others. But 40 have been pulled apart, and they've since been cremated. It's bittersweet. Sweet in that these pianos are given the chance to live again. Bitter in that sometimes all Petrich can do is burn them with dignity. I was hoping that I could get you to play on the piano.
Me?
Yes.
I haven't played this piano for a while.
For Radioactive, I'm Kamna Shastri.
That was Kamna Shastri, an intern with Radioactive at KUOW. If you like Youthcast, you'll love How Sound, the podcast backstory to great storytelling. Listen and subscribe to How Sound at prx.org. And find us, Generation PRX, on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
This seems like such an obvious point, but where does creativity come from? It comes from creative people. We often tend to design top-down programming, and that can work for some vehicles, but really we know our lasting work comes from singular vision or collaborative energy. I'd like us to throw the doors open more to people of singular vision, to welcome bright-eyed, mission-driven talent that'll carry us forward. We can function like the real estate market. Encourage some artists to move in. Let them fix the place up, make it cool, so that everybody wants to come in.
That is independent producer Jay Allison talking to a room full of public radio program directors in 2011. You are listening to Public Radio Remix.
TED Talks are recorded live at the TED Conference and partner events. This episode features author A.J. Jacobs. This talk contains powerful visuals. Download the video at TED.com. Here's A.J. Jacobs.
I've spent the last decade subjecting myself to pain and humiliation, hopefully for a good cause, which is self-improvement. And I've done this in 3 parts. So first I started with the mind, and I decided to try to get smarter by reading the entire Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z, or more precisely from Ak to Zibiech. And here's a little image of that. And this was an amazing year. It was really a fascinating journey. It was painful at times, especially for those around me. My wife started to fine me $1 for every irrelevant fact I inserted into conversation. So it had its downsides. But after that, I decided to work on the spirit. As I mentioned last year, I grew up with no religion at all. I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. So, not really. But I decided to learn about the Bible and my heritage by actually diving in and trying to live it and immerse myself in it. So I decided to follow all the rules of the Bible, and from the Ten Commandments to growing my beard, because Leviticus says you cannot shave. So this is what I looked like by the end. Thank you for that reaction. Yeah, I look a little like Moses or Ted Kaczynski. I got both of them. So there's the topiary there, and yeah, there's the sheep. Now, the final part of the trilogy was I wanted to focus on the body and try to be the healthiest person I could be, the healthiest person alive. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of years, and I just finished a couple of months ago. And I have to say thank God, because living so healthily was killing me. It was it was so overwhelming, because the amount of things you have to do, it's just mind-boggling. I was listening to all the experts and talking to sort of a board of medical advisors, and they were telling me all the things I had to do. I had to eat right, exercise, meditate, pet dogs, because that lowers the blood pressure. I wrote the book on a treadmill. It took me about 1,000 miles to write the book. I had to put on sunscreen. This was no small feat, because if you listen to dermatologists, they say that you should have a shot glass full of sunscreen, and you have to reapply it every 2 to 4 hours. So I think half of my book advance went into sunscreen. I was like a glazed donut for most of the year. There was the washing of hands. I had to do that properly. And my immunologist told me that I have to wipe down all of the remote controls and iPhones in my house, because those are just orgies of germs. So that took a lot of time. I also tried to be the safest person I could be, because that's a part of health. I was inspired by the Danish Safety Council. They started a public campaign that says, a walking helmet is a good helmet. So they believe you should not just wear helmets for biking, but also for walking around. And you can see there they're shopping with their helmets. So yeah, I tried that. Now, it's a little extreme, I admit, but if you think about this, this is actually, the Freakonomics authors wrote about this, that more people die on a per mile basis from drunk walking than from drunk driving. So, something to think about tonight if you had a couple. So I finished, and it was a success in a sense. All of the markers went in the right direction. I lost, my cholesterol went down, I lost weight. My wife stopped telling me that I looked pregnant, so that was nice. It was successful overall, but I also learned that I was too healthy, and that was unhealthy. I was so focused on doing all these things that I was neglecting my friends and family, and as Derek can tell you, having a strong social network is so crucial to our health. So I finished, and I kind of went overboard on the week after the project was over. I went to the dark side, and I just indulged myself. It was like something out of Caligula, but without the sex part, because I have 3 young kids, so that wasn't happening. But the overeating and the overdrinking, definitely. I finally have stabilized. So now I'm back to adopting many of, not all, I don't wear a helmet anymore, but a lot of dozens of the healthy behaviors that I adopted during my year. It was really a life-changing project. And I, of course, don't have time to go into all of them. Let me just tell you 2 really quickly. The first is, and this was surprising to me, I didn't expect this to come out, but I live a much quieter life now, because we live in such a noisy world. You know, it's so noisy. There's trains and planes and cars, and Bill O'Reilly, he's very noisy, And this is a real underestimated, underappreciated health hazard. Not just because it harms our hearing, which it obviously does, but it actually initiates the fight or flight response. A loud noise will get your fight or flight response going, and this, over the years, can cause real damage, cardiovascular damage. The World Health Organization just did a study that they published this year, and it said it was done in Europe, and they estimated that 1.6 million years of healthy living are lost every year in Europe because of noise pollution, which is, so they would think very deadly. So I have, and by the way, it's also terrible for your brain. It really impairs cognition. And our founding fathers knew about this when they wrote the Constitution. Dirt all over the cobblestones outside the hall so that they could concentrate. So without noise reduction technology, our country would not exist. So as a patriot, I felt, it was important I wear all the earplugs and the earphones, and it's really improved my life in a surprising and unexpected way. And the second point I want to make, the final point, is that, and it's actually been a theme of TED-Med, that joy is so important to your health. That you cannot, none of these behaviors, very few of these behaviors will stick with me unless there's some sense of pleasure and joy in them. And just to give you one instance of this, food, the junk food industry is really great at pressing our pleasure buttons and figuring out what's the most pleasurable. But I think we can use their techniques and apply them to healthy food. To give just one example, we love crunchiness, mouthfeel. So I've tried to incorporate crunchiness into a lot of my recipes, throw in some sunflower seeds, and you can almost trick yourself into thinking you're eating Doritos. And it has made me a healthier person. So that is it. The book about it comes out in April. It's called Drop Dead Healthy, and I hope that I don't get sick during the book tour. That's my greatest hope. So thank you very much.
That was A.J. Jacobs, recorded at TED-Med 2011 in San Diego, California, October 2011. For more information on TED, visit TED.com.
I make discoveries every day listening to KUNC. UNC for stimulating ideas. Deep, insightful insights into the human psyche.
Gives me something to talk about, think about.
You're not exposed to all the variety of people and human conditions and experiences, and when you listen to the radio, it puts you into that world.
I always feel so much smarter after listening. Join me as a KUNC member by going online to KUNC.org.
This is KUNC 91.5 Greeley, Fort Collins.
KVNC 90.9 Minturn Vale.
KENC 90.7 Estes Park.
KRNC 88.5 Steamboat Springs.
And KMPB 90.7 Breckenridge.
You're listening to PRX Remix. I'm talking into a drinking glass. If late, kind of punchy. Stay tuned.
Here in a park in Ellensburg, Washington, there's a small stream. A tree grows beside it. Daniel Curtis the Hollander's ashes lay beneath the roots. Daniel committed suicide here last year. The tree is his memorial site. Daniel was a friend of mine, and like many, I've been trying to make sense of his death. I went to the people who knew him best to find out who Daniel really was. Sarah is Daniel's sister. They were very close.
I would say he was not like most brothers in the way that he wasn't really overprotective because he wanted me to experience things to the fullest.
Nick is Daniel's younger brother. He remembers a time when Daniel helped out a teammate during one of his cross-country races.
Daniel noticed that he was struggling. He was in the very back, so Daniel ran with him, just running around him in circles until he got to the very end, and they sprinted together, and Daniel dropped off a little bit so Ethan would finish ahead of him.
Daniel was a lot of things. To his parents, he was exceptionally smart, and they considered him to be more towards the genius realm. To friends, he was funny and always held some dark, twisted humor up his sleeve. He was sarcastic just as much as he was serious. He skipped the small talk and always went straight to the point. It seemed like Daniel had it all. At least that's how it seemed to his friends and me. His family saw a different side. Daniel was struggling with depression. He had his first suicide attempt at 14. His family sought help right away. For the next 4 years, his family thought generally things were going to be okay. July 10th, 2014. Nick came home to find his family sitting around the table. They were crying. Daniel was missing. Then they found a suicide note. Nick and his dad went searching for him, and then his dad got a call.
When my dad got the call, he didn't have to say anything. I could see the expression on his face change, and I knew that it had happened, but I was just waiting for him to say something, and as soon as he said something, I just lost it.
Daniel's father, Guillermo de Hollander, was stunned.
It felt as a horse had kicked me right in the heart. I can distinctly remember the feeling I had as I sat out the rest of the day. The day seemed to go on forever after that moment. We all sat there outside on the porch. None of us knew what to do.
Since Daniel's death, his family has had to figure out how to cope. Each of them is doing something. His father knew he had to stay strong for his other kids. For his part, Nick has started paying more attention to how his friends feel.
I take it very, very seriously, and I make sure that I am available to them at all times, if and when they want to talk.
Sarah does too, and makes a point to encourage people. She does her best to make sure that others feel like they have her support.
Like, I reach out to people who are struggling with their mental health and keeping it in, like, a positive place. I also, I go to kind of like suicide awareness events.
As a family, they don't want people to forget Daniel and don't want anyone else to go through what they've experienced. Daniel's father has advice for people who are on the outside and are unsure of what to do.
Take a suicide attempt or note or any talk of it seriously and get them into counseling. The one thing I'd say is you just keep telling your child you love them and that you would miss them if they did anything stupid. Life is a gift, and it can be changed and snuffed out in a second.
Sarah's advice is that people shouldn't be afraid to talk about Daniel and his death, even though it's hard and sometimes awkward.
It's such a hard topic that people don't want to bring it up because they're afraid to say something wrong or to hurt me or something, but honestly, I'd rather have someone say something that's wrong or hurtful than have people completely ignore the whole topic.
When I think of Daniel, the first thing that comes to mind is Pink Floyd. It was his favorite band, and for lots of us who knew him, seeing anything Pink Floyd related makes us think of him.
There's just times when, like right when we get in the car and turn on the radio, the song "Wish You Were Here" just starts playing. That's the first song he showed me by Pink Floyd, and he loved Pink Floyd.
After Daniel's death, a group of his friends and his sister all got tattoos. Many of them make reference to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Sarah's tattoo says, "Wish you were here, Daniel." To keep Daniel's spirit alive, Daniel's mom passed a bill for suicide awareness and started a scholarship at Ellensburg High School for a college-bound senior who excels in math and or science. It's called the Daniel de Hollander Memorial Scholarship. With Radioactive, I'm Lola Garcia.
This is 99% Invisible. I'm Roman Mars.
Live
Launch Control, this is Space Venture. Radio is on. Roger.
Spacecraft design is a study in humanity. At least that's what Mary Roach says.
My name is Mary Roach. I'm the author of Packing for Mars, The Curious Science of Life in the Void.
In the beginning, the designers of the Space Habitation Modules.
The box where the crew lives.
Yep, that's the one. They stuck with what they knew.
Very few people had spent any time up there or in zero gravity. People just intuitively designed it like a room on Earth. There would be a control panel, and then there were little chairs. There were seats that you would sit in. It makes no sense. In zero gravity, you can't sit. You would have to strap yourself to the seat.
The reason is simple.
We are humans. When we have a room, we have a floor and a ceiling, we have chairs and tables, and that's what we do, and that's how it was designed.
But getting stuff into space is expensive, so there's always a grand effort to minimize weight and to create the most efficient space possible. And all those human comforts came under scrutiny.
So then they went to the other extreme, get rid of it all, because in space, walls become your table. If you have a table and you put something down on the table doesn't act like a table. It doesn't hold it there. It just floats off. A drawer is